Back at the beginning of 2022, Polaris released a brand new RZR, one that we had all anticipated was coming, that would put it back on the top of all the numbers as being the peak of the mountain as far as power, travel, the most everything. And this is it. This is the Pro R. So the RZR Pro R, and specifically in this case, a Pro R4. We've been super looking forward to having a little seat time in this particular RZR. From the moment it was released, it's just the most of everything. So I thought what I would do is kind of walk you through the vehicle and offer a few thoughts as we go. I'll try to hit everything. Here we go. So as you can see, this is a very large side-by-side. The only other one that even compares, of course, is the Can-Am Maverick X3 Max. And they're both about the same length in the 4-seat version. I think it's like half an inch difference in size, in length. So you could see it is a big vehicle. I think the thing that pops for me immediately, and did on paper and certainly when you are looking at it is 74 inches wide. And kind of before this point, because of the X3 Max and the Turbo S, you were looking at 72 inches. They kind of redefined it at 74. So it is a wide suspension type vehicle. And as you can see, I'm going to go on and throw the 16 inches of ground clearance. The ground clearance on it is ridiculous. Everything about this vehicle is just over the top big. It's just big. And for what it's designed for, that's exactly what it needs to be. So, you can see it's a big vehicle, 4-seat. It has the same interior as essentially as the Pro XP. The difference, of course, is the suspension and the cage and all of the underneath parts. The body shape, the interior is really a Pro XP and almost identical. Has plenty of room when you open these doors. It's easy to get in and out of despite height. No matter kind of what size you are, it's easy to get in and out of, with the exception of the fact that it's very high off the ground. And for even a person like me who's on the shorter side, I have to really step up into it. But it's comfortable, and there is plenty of room both in the front and in the back, and you can see there's plenty of room to get in and out of. Also, the seats in the back are set a little higher than the seats in the front. I'll also say I find the seats comfortable when you sit in them. I'm going to get into more details of a review here in a second video. But, as I said, plenty of room. Doesn't matter if you're tall or short. The seat adjusts, no problem, very easily. It comes with harness, which on these vehicles, when you think about it, is an absolute must. Needs to have a harness on it when you think of the speed of what this will do. So, some other things that make it super comfortable. It has the telescoping as well as adjustable up and down steering wheel with the flat bottom to stay out of your, off your knees if you were much taller than I am. You can adjust this as well as the instrument cluster, which is analog and digital, to be in the perfect height. And I have found that to be the case when you get into it. And I think the pedals, because you can adjust the seat, are at an ideal height. Of course, you've got cup holders, lots of storage in the middle. It's a big vehicle. As you can see, it's a big vehicle. There's no problem making it comfortable. Talk about the steering wheel. You have steering wheel controls. You can increase your volume, turn your radio on, going through the different dynamic settings. You can do all that. Then on the inside, you also have ride command. And ride command gives you all sorts of stuff. It's GPS. I always just say sat nav, which still blows my mind. We have that on the side-by-sides, and it's something I would pay the extra money for. So you have trails and you have a database of that stuff. You track your own stuff, you create your own waypoints. Kind of the wow factor is if other people in your party are running the Ride Command app, which is now, I believe, the Polaris app, then you can track them in your party, and each person gets assigned a color, and you can see where you are on the map as well as your party. And it uses long-range Bluetooth when there's no cell signal. So, and they've continued to improve upon that, and it works. It's really very neat and helpful if you're in a group of people out riding the trails or in the desert. It gives you that. In this case, you also get the stereo system, Rockford Fosgate system. It's a stage 2 system. You have speakers up here, and down here. And it has plenty of, I forget what the wattage is on it, but it has plenty of ohms to it. I will also say, I think it looks good. I think the Pro XP looks good. And when you look at it, it's kind of awe-inspiring, as it were, to look at it. Another thing that I really like is the eyebrow LEDs on the front. I think that's a cool look, and I like them on all these side-by-sides that have them. I'm a fan of that. I guess going on and talking about the engine, which is back here, and I could have led with this, but I just wanted to give you a few shots of it, because this is another thing that blows my mind. This is an inline 4-cylinder 2-liter engine. It's called the Fury, or Fury. It has 225 horsepower, which just blows my mind. That's more horsepower than my 91 Suburban I had. That's more horsepower than some of the cars, well, not some, a lot of the cars you go by today. This has more horsepower. And that just is crazy to me, how much horsepower we're to the point of having a 4-cylinder. And there's not even a comparison as far as like the competitors, and the only real competitor in this realm is going to be your Can-Am X3. And I'm sure Can-Am is sitting over there already know exactly how they're going to up their horsepower now this year, or not this year, but next year or the year following. And we're just continuing to put bigger engines in it. Now this is naturally aspirated, it's not a turbo. So throttle response is a little quicker. You're not waiting for the turbo to spin up. However, I think on all of these, Pro XP, any of the turbos, they spin up so quick that they're so responsive anyway. I don't know if this is any more responsive. It's hard for me to tell in my driving experience. I just know it goes really, really freaking fast, and it happens quick. I love the throttle response. When you're going slower, you get throttle response for going slower. When you're ready to just hammer it, it just does it, okay? So the engine is pretty amazing. And the idea of having 225 horsepower is amazing. I think that Polaris said this is limited to 90 miles an hour. It may be 85, but I'm thinking it's 90, or maybe that's just in my head. And I can leave that in the notes as well after I ask them again what it's limited to. It's super fast, and I'll get into it, but in a straight line, you come off the line, I swear the earth splits. It is just so fast, and you're at 70 before you can even blink. I would love to put this against some of the supercars, or the maybe not supercar, Lamborghini, Bugatti, or something like that, but any of the sports cars. I think this would be to 70 quicker. But maybe that's just me, maybe that's in my head, but that would make for a great video. You have 3 different settings for your input, your throttle input, how sensitive the throttle is going to be. I think it's race, sport, and rock. Rock gives you lots of pedal movement and slow throttle response. Sport gives you a lot faster throttle response. Like, I would think sport is normal. Very responsive. Put it in race, and it's like every twitch of your foot the vehicle responds to that. It's crazy. But you have those controls, and it's nice. It's nice. But let's talk about the wheels real quick. These are 5-lug wheels on 15-inch rims and 32-inch tires. They're the Maxxis Rampage Fury version. They're just huge. Okay, let's talk about the suspension. And if I could summarize suspension, if you check this thing out, you will see it's over the top beefy and large and extremely strong. Like the trailing arms, fully boxed and stamped. The front A-arms, boxed and stamped. And they're huge. I mean, look at the trailing arms on this. They're just huge. The front A-arms, huge. You also have a 3-piece stabilizer bar in the front and back. Your axles, your tie rods, just everything is over the top beefy. Polaris talks about the suspension on this and the vehicle in general has the most testing hours of any vehicle they've built. It's just designed to the extreme to be able to handle the most extreme hammering in the desert, rocks, all that good stuff, all day long, no problems. And when you look at the build, I believe it. A lot of times the aftermarket will build parts to strengthen pieces on side-by-sides that need strengthening. I don't know how you would strengthen this thing. I don't know how you would strengthen it. It's that beefy. I don't know what you would change. So the build is just over the top strong. All right, let's talk about travel. This has the most travel, both the 2-seat and the 4-seat version of any of the sport side-by-sides on the market. And of course, when you look at the most powerful, like the Super Sport, and I would consider this Super Sport, you're talking about the Maverick X3 Max. This has more travel than that. You've got 22.25 and 24.5 of actual wheel travel. Polaris labels it though as 27 inches of usable travel in the front and 29 inches of usable travel in the rear. And I'm going to verify those numbers and put them on the screen. The reason that they use that as a standard is because even as the wheels, the shocks go through all the travel and they bottom out, the vehicle should still be off the ground a handful of inches. Even if you bottom a suspension out, you don't want to actually hit the ground with the side-by-side. Can-Am, when they give their travel numbers, they take it all the way to where the bottom would be on the ground. Or that's the way it's being explained to me. In the case of the actual travel, that would still, on the Polaris RZR here, the Pro R, or any of the RZRs for that matter, it's still off the ground. So that's why they changed that metric so it could compare apples to apples of usable travel. If it went through all 29 inches of usable travel, it would hit the ground. So I hope that makes some sense, and you can of course leave comments and ask questions on that. I'll do my best to continue to explain that. All right, now that we've talked through all of that, let's talk about the actual shock setup on this. This is the Pro R4 Ultimate. Wouldn't matter, 2-seat, 4-seat. The Ultimate version comes with the Dynamics DV active suspension. This is the newer version of Dynamics that was released, I believe it was back, I want to say it was back in 2016. But it might have been a couple years later. Anyway, what this does is it automatically adjusts the suspension on the fly up to 200 times a second, which is, to me, is just mind-blowing. And it can adjust each shock, both compression and rebound, and that's really significant. What happened, Polaris released theirs, I think that was actually 2018. They released theirs, and then everybody else followed. It took a couple of years, but everybody else that makes these sports side-by-sides typically, and even some of the non-pure sports, have these live valve systems. And so they adjust based upon the terrain. But a lot of them do not do rebound. They only do compression of the shock. This does both, and that is really significant. And it can do it per shock. So as the wheel and tire are moving up and down, it's just going to work. It also adjusts the system, adjusts steering as well, the amount of effort into the steering, the power steering system, and all that good stuff. It also takes into account body roll, and then it adjusts those shocks to compensate for that. It is an interesting experience to drive. I've spent time on the 2018 Dynamics version when it first came out. That was really interesting. This is a whole new level. As the driver, we can actually select 4 different modes that set the shocks up to handle and to make their own adjustments based upon the terrain. So we do have some input, and it comes comfort, track, Baja, rock. Those are the 4. And so depending on what we're trying to tackle, we can set up the shocks for those different terrains, and then the vehicle itself will make adjustments for that. Now, it will make these adjustments up to 200 times a second, which is just insane. So as an example, if you put it in rock mode, it will adjust compression and maximize the ride height by strengthening or firming up the shocks all the way to where you get that maximum ground clearance. And you're going super slow, so that's not horrible of a ride. You put it in, I believe it's Baja, and I think the setting goes to about middle on all 4 shocks. Now what's really interesting is you can watch on the screen the setting of the 4 shocks. So as you're driving it, you're coming into a corner, you go into the corner, if you glance over, it's firming up those outside shocks to prevent body roll, to let you take the corner faster. You can see that that's what it's doing. Or if you brake real hard and you're looking for that rock forward, it's actually under hard braking. It firms up the front shock so you don't rock forward as much. When you're accelerating, it'll firm up the back end so it doesn't squat so much. Obviously, depending on the mode. And then, of course, you have the oh crap button, the big red button on the steering wheel, which still is amazing to me when I think about it. On the Pro XP and this, where if you press that button, it takes all 4 shocks to maximum compression, so that whatever has just happened, you're going to have the maximum amount of keeping you from blowing through the travel on the shocks. And it knows if you get into the air, Dynamics knows, and it will firm all 4 shocks up for that landing. It's really very unbelievable and a unique experience to drive it. And I'll get into my thoughts on that under a review. But I'll tell you, it's a really unique experience, and it makes it fun, and you can also control kind of those settings. Not kinda, you can control the settings, and then the vehicle takes it from there and makes those adjustments on the fly. It does definitely allow you to corner faster, to be under control easier. As the driver, you can push the vehicle more because of that active suspension system. I'm a fan. Of course, it costs more money. As you go from the Pro R Premium to the Pro R Ultimate, that's one of the things you're gaining is that Dynamics, the DV version, the new version of it. Something else that's changed on this that I think is worth mentioning is on the Pro R, not on the Turbo R. The Turbo R still has an all-wheel drive system in it. The Pro R has a true four-wheel drive system in it. They call it something, I'll put it on the screen, I just can't recall at the moment, but it has a specific name that they're calling it. But bottom line, it's a two-wheel drive system, then you put it in a four-wheel drive limited slip front diff, and then you can lock it. And so it's 3 different settings. Unlike the tried and true years of Polaris with the all-wheel drive, which I think works fine, This goes to a different system. I'm really curious to see if they will funnel that down, or there'll be some kind of choosing in the future for different models that's not the Pro R, but who knows. I can tell you, I've run it a lot in four-wheel drive, limited slip, which is what I do on most systems. Rather, you know, if it's not a Polaris, rather than all-wheel drive in Polaris. And, you know, it's interesting to me that they've gone to that. I would love to know why, but that's what they've gone to, and it's worth noting. I think I will sum it up, though, by saying this. 74 inches wide is a lot of inches wide. And this is a very specific vehicle for a very specific purpose. So, if you really do live out and ride in the desert, I'm thinking west of the US, Arizona, Utah, not all of Utah, some of Utah, certainly California, Nevada, those places that are iconic with off-roading, open desert or dunes. This is your vehicle. If you want the most of everything in every respect, this is your vehicle. 74 inches wide is really, really wide. Now there will be some people who will go out and spend the money and buy these to trail ride, which makes absolutely no sense whatsoever because of how wide it is. I could see some rock crawlers that you could kind of justify this, but you're going to really limit yourself on trail riding if you get a 74 inch wide vehicle. What I've found at the ATV Escape World headquarters is the only place I can really drive this thing is in our big hayfield, which you can see here. And that's because the trails that I've cut, even the wider ones, it's just such a big vehicle, and it would be big even if it were the 2-seat version. 4-seat version is so long, but the width of this and the 2-seat, same problem. It's just, I mean, if you've got fire roads, of course it'll work on that. As far as what it's really designed to do, you need open spaces. You need desert. It would be an epic desert racing type vehicle. It would be an epic dunes vehicle, and I can't wait to drive it out in those environments. But as a trail vehicle, it's just not designed for that. Will it do it? If the trail is wide enough, absolutely. And rock crawling, it'll do that too. But that is something to note. Because you're paying for the most of everything, you need to sit down for this next part. This 4-seat version of the biggest and the best and the most, this is $45,000, $44,999. That is an amazing amount of money, and there's no doubt Polaris will sell all of them they can build. It is an epic vehicle, but you're absolutely paying for the most of the most of the most in every respect. So I would come back to saying again, I would caution anyone, I get wanting to have the fastest and the best, even for trail riding. For the rare occasion you would get out on a logging road and want to drive it super, super fast. I get it, totally. But spending this much money and then using it as a trail vehicle just doesn't make any sense. And in some ways, you're going to regret it. Like I have also found when you do kind of try to trail ride with it, when you're having to constantly wonder if you're going to fit or if you're going to, you know, get scratched on one side because it's just so wide. It's a little wearing. And it also, the weight of the Pro R is substantial. It's got, I'm going to say roughly 500 pounds more weight than the equivalent Can-Am Max X3 because of how heavy duty they built it. So I would just make that, again, I would make that caution, and it's $45,000. I can buy a brand new, like decently trimmed sport utility, though it's getting hard to do that for that much money and drive it every single day. So that's just something to bear in mind. I don't recall off the top of my head the 2-seat version, but it's probably about $2,000 less than the 4-seat version with the same trim level. About $2,000 or $2,500 as far as I remember. Anyway, so that walks you through the Pro R, the Polaris RZR Pro R 4, and also, with the exception of the length, and of course, well, just the added length and what that requires, everything else I said applies to the 2-seat version too. Same suspension, same everything. The Pro R is in a league in its own. It is not comparable to the Turbo R, the Pro XB, as far as, like, this has a completely unique suspension. As I mentioned, the bodywork is I believe it's exactly the same. If not, it's very, very similar. It may have, I can't remember, like, it's got a hood scoop. I don't think the Turbo R or the Pro XB has that, not to that extent, but I'd have to look to remind myself if that's the case. And so it's a unique vehicle, but it has a lot of functionality that it shares with the Pro XB and the Turbo R. So that is the Polaris RZR Pro R 4, and that goes over the vehicle. Also, how much it shares with the Turbo R and the Pro XB as far as the body, but it's a unique thing, all on its own with the way it's built. It's the most of the most, the beefiest of the beefy, and the fastest of the fast when it comes to a side-by-side. Hopefully this has been helpful. Feel free to ask questions, and look for our next walk-around video, as well as a review video of this.